So today we're going to explore one of the trickiest situations that you can be in as a professional butler. Now, this is a situation that a lot of you will think, surely that's never going to happen. But those of you that have been working as a butler for a while will know that it will almost certainly happen to you at some point. And that's where your principal asks you to do something that's against the law. What, of course, everyone would, in a perfect world, simply say, well, of course, you would never break the law under any circumstances for anyone. And yes, of course, that is the simple answer to this question. But then life is never quite that simple, because even saying no in itself can be fraught with difficulties. And we definitely don't want anyone going to prison, but we also don't want anyone to lose their job. So it's a fine tightrope that sometimes you need to walk. This is my main tip in this situation. Try and offer your principal an alternative. Look at what they're asking you to do and think of something else you can do for them that is not illegal. Obviously, this will be unique for every single case, depending on what they're asking for. But so many of these requests are not big criminal acts. They're literally them just wanting something in a convenient way that happens to be illegal in that country. Things like pain medication. There are always alternatives. You can research other things they can take which will give them the same relief but not be against the law. If they're asking you to drive beyond the speed limit and you feel it's dangerous and it would not be a sensible thing to do, you can offer up the opinion that taking a different route might be the best idea, and sometimes just going faster is not the key. Our principals do not like to be told no. So avoid the word no and offer them an alternative. In the news recently, we have seen Donald Trump's butler valet being in court for allegedly breaking the law for Donald Trump. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know anything about American politics or American law. From what I've seen, he simply moved some boxes of papers from one room to another at the bequest of his boss. Now, that sounds very much like something that anyone might do and have absolutely no idea that they're breaking the law. I mean, goodness, the amount of times that I have moved a box of papers from my boss's office to his study to somewhere else. Now, I can only assume that that's never been an illegal practice. But then, of course, you would assume that until the worst happens. The trust relationship between an employer and their butler, of course, works both ways. It would be nice to think that a butler could always rely on their employer to never put them in the situation where they're breaking the law. But alas, that is maybe too big a hope. But it's not that simple in other ways as well. For example, the law in different countries is different. And what is completely legal in one country could feasibly give you a death sentence in another. For example, buying a bag of marijuana in Holland is 100% legal and actively encouraged. Doing the same thing in Saudi Arabia would land you in some extremely serious trouble. Which is, of course, why it's always incredibly important to know the law of the country that you're in. And also to remember the fact that your employer may well not know the law of the country that you're in. There are many things which are completely legal in one country and completely illegal in another. Drugs, prostitution, even simple pain medications, which here in the UK are 100% legal to pop down to the pharmacy and buy, would be completely illegal if you're traveling to Dubai. A lot of people forget that. They think of countries like Dubai being so similar to the UK that they don't realize that there's big differences in the law. And of course, there's even bigger nuances than that, because there's certain things which are illegal in some countries that are not just not illegal in countries like the UK and the US and Europe, but we would think they were basic human rights. There are countries where it's illegal for women to learn to read. There are countries where it's illegal to be gay. Now, this brings a whole new level, because would we not hide the fact that our employee is gay from the authorities in a country in a law that we would deem unfair? Now, I am not for a second going to advise you on your policy on that, but you can see how nuanced this is when it comes to actually thinking about what you would do in these situations. But there is one thing that I do want to make very, very clear. Never allow your employer to put adverse pressure on you to break the law. It is not reasonable for them to say that you will lose your job if you do not commit an offence on their behalf. This is something that genuinely does happen, and I just want to really make it clear that that's not okay. That's not really an employer that you want to have. I once went to an interview for a client. The first interview was with the client's PA. And the client's PA made it clear, even if they didn't say it in so many words, they made it clear that the butler would be required to score drugs for the client. Now, this was not something that I would be prepared to do. And I made it clear that this was not the job for me. Purely by fluke, many years later, I met someone who did do that job and take that job. And due to their, shall we say, personality or personal circumstances, unlike myself, they were extremely happy with that situation. Now, I'm not here to judge anyone, but for me, that was a situation that I would not want to be in. So what should you do if your principal is pressuring you to break the law? First thing I would do is make sure that the principal realizes that the thing that they're asking you to do is illegal. There's genuinely a good possibility that they don't realize. Even if they do realize, there's a possibility that they were hoping that you didn't realize it was illegal. At this point, they may well go back and say, I apologize, I didn't realize it was illegal. If they are still pressuring you to do it, it's of course always very important that you're true to your own moral compass. No one should ever or could ever coerce you to change your own morals. And you should always act accordingly to what you know is right. Is it worth losing your job over? Yes, absolutely it is worth losing your job over if the thing that they're asking you to do is against your own moral judgment. If it's something that is actually not against your moral judgment and you think that the law in the country that you're working in is unfair, you still need to be extremely careful because you also don't want to end up in prison or with a massive fine. Your client may well say that they will pay whatever fine and they will provide you with whatever legal cover is required. But then it always begs the question of when push comes to shove, would they really do that? A small act of breaking the law, which to be honest, for most of us is not really outside of our moral compass, is breaking the speed limit. Now, I'll be honest with you, however long ago the statute of limitations is, oh, I'm joking, but of course I have broken the speed limit and I have done it at the bequest of my principals who've wanted to get somewhere in a hurry. As we of course know, that's not right and we shouldn't break the speed limit while driving. Most of us, to be honest, probably do, and certainly anyone who grew up watching Smokey and the Bandit films almost feels like it can be the moral thing to do. Disclaimer, it's not the moral thing to do. Another thing that any butler that works in the countryside will have to deal with is, of course, guns. Even in the UK, for field sports within the countryside, there's a lot of guns that need moving about from one place to another. Rifles, shotguns, etc. It's extremely important that anyone who is moving such items is correctly licensed to do so. Don't give in to pressure to do something that you know is wrong. Always remember that your life and your liberty are much more important than your job. So even if you actually don't mind doing this thing, you don't find it immoral, but the consequences for you doing it are severe, think of that before you do it. Because all the promises in the world that your client can make will not be able to prevent a criminal prosecution. This is a big subject. This is something that is, of course, going to divide opinions, and I feel confident we're going to get a lot of comments on this video. I'm not trying to make anyone's decisions for them. I'm just trying to make sure that they make their own decisions with their eyes open and don't get themselves into a lot of trouble. Thank you so much for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you again on the next video. Bye-bye.